Welcome to the Haunted Brew. Grab your favorite blend of coffee or tea and pull up a comfy chair for some unexplainable and unsettling stories. Ones that may leave you intrigued or sleeping with the light on tonight. The story unfolds during the years 2013 and 2014, spanning an extended period of time. While I'm uncertain about the precise timeline, I can provide an account of the events that led up to it. I used to travel to Idaho 2 to 3 times a year to visit my sister. Most of the time it was in the summer, but there were occasions I visited her in the fall and winter. For anonymity purposes, we'll call my sister Ripley and her partner Chris. Ripley and Chris lived in a very nice tri-level home in a quiet neighborhood. It was built in the 1940s, with other homes in the neighborhood being built in a similar time period. One of the homes, next door to Ripley and Chris's, was built as early as 1900. I thoroughly enjoyed the history of some of the homes in that area. I loved the tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors, always willing to share the spoils of their gardens. I had always eagerly anticipated a visit out to Idaho, which included remote hikes, trips to the local bakery, early evening barbecues, and ghost stories with coffee. My experiences there had always been warm and inviting, with the exception of those 2 visits during the years of 2013 and 2014. These events occurred when 3 children had moved into my sister's home. Ripley and Chris decided they wanted to foster children with the hopes of it turning into an adoption. There were a couple of boys available to foster. We'll call them Mikey and Dash. Mikey was a toddler, and Dash was of preschool age. The 2 were interested in taking the boys. However, the boys had an older sister in 2nd grade, and it was suggested they fostered her as well. We'll call her Sheena. Not wanting to separate the siblings, Chris and Ripley agreed and took in Sheena with them. When I first had the opportunity to meet the kids, I was excited. I'm an educator and a mom, so I have a real passion for children. I bought them toys and began fully stepping into my role as an aunt. However, I didn't get the opportunity to spend too much time with them before they were taken to the home of their parental grandparents. This is because the 3 of us, along with some friends, were taking a trip out of town and were planning on being gone for a few days. But upon our return, we resumed the visit with the kids, and I continued to enjoy my time with them. The only strange thing that occurred on that visit was that Dash continuously repeated something odd. He kept saying that there was a ghost that lived in the closet. It was scary and sometimes even hurt him. He then said he wanted to show me the ghost by having me step into the closet with a shut door. I told him I didn't want to step into the closet, but I would take a look and make sure nothing spooky was in there. He hid behind me as I opened the door and swiped my hand across the hanging jackets. "See?" I told him. "No ghost." Just to give you a rough visual of his home, it had 3 levels: the upstairs, the main middle level, and the downstairs basement area that was quite nice. The basement was carpeted with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a laundry area, and a pantry. The area that contained the closet with the said ghost was the only bedroom on the main middle level. This was the same level that contained the family room, the kitchen and dining area, as well as a bathroom and step-down living room. I would be lying if I said that Dash's comment didn't make me feel a little uneasy, but since nothing occurred thus far to support his stories, I finished up my visit and headed home within a couple of days. That following summer, my husband, our 3 sons, and I had decided we were going to visit Yellowstone. Since my sister and her partner's home isn't too far away from our destination, we decided to stay with them for a couple of nights on our way to the park. We spent the day with Ripley and Chris, and as the sun was starting to sink, we thought it would be a good idea to open a bottle of wine and talk as we barbecued our chicken and vegetables. While we were prepping the food, I asked my sons to play with the boys and their older sister, using the toys I had provided from the last visit. The boys weren't thrilled about it, but they reluctantly agreed, knowing it would be short-lived since dinner would be ready soon. I hadn't been outside for more than 20 minutes when I heard a blood-curdling scream. As I rushed into the mid-level bedroom, I first noticed my sons. All three of them were sitting on the floor with their hands up, arms out to the side, and eyes open extremely wide. What happened? I asked. My oldest son had begun stumbling over his words and said that he didn't know, that he was talking to Dash, who mid-sentence slammed into the floor. Dash then began yelling, "It's the ghost! It's the ghost! The ghost did it! The ghost hurt me!" Now, some of you may be thinking it's possible it was one of my sons, but anyone that knew them would know they wouldn't have done such a thing. It was also evident that all of them were very shocked by the whole incident. When Ripley and Chris asked what happened, I relayed the whole story. Ripley looked down pensively and then began to tell me of all the things that happened since the kids had moved in. She told us that on several occasions, Dash would say that there was a ghost bothering him. He'd go on to describe the ghost's appearance with his hands, making motions over his head, as if to say the ghost's hair was sticking upright. He also said that sometimes when he was sleeping, the ghost would jump up from under his bed and frighten him. Ripley proceeded to tell me that Dash was so scared, she'd often have to sleep in the family room with him on the couch, and on one occasion, she awakened to his screams, in which he began repeating that the ghost was standing in the corner of the room. Based on what Dash had told me during my previous visit, what the boys just experienced, and what Ripley went on to tell me, I began to feel a lot more than uneasy. My family and I left a couple of days later for Yellowstone, spent a couple of days there, and then stopped back by Ripley and Chris's house before beginning the journey home. It wasn't until the following trip that things took a much more frightening turn. A few months later, I returned to Idaho for another visit. What was it this time? Traveling to craters of the moon, heading to open fields to collect blueberries, or maybe a hike near an old, forgotten railroad. It didn't matter. I was looking forward to it. After arriving at Ripley and Chris's house, I was told to put my bags in the bedroom on the main middle level. I had noticed that things had been rearranged a bit. The middle level bedroom of the home no longer housed the two younger boys. This had become Sheena's room, and the two of them had moved upstairs. The head of her bed rested against the same wall that housed the door. Her bed stuck out into the middle of the floor, perpendicular. It was parallel to the row of closets that contained the ghost that Dash talked about. This means that to lay on your back in Sheena's bed, your right side would be on the closet side, and the left would near her nightstand, with a small lamp and a row of windows. Across the floor at the foot of the bed would have been a chest of drawers under another window. The first night I slept in that room, I felt a little nervous, but without having experienced anything unusual in the house myself, I fell asleep pretty quickly. The next morning I awoke to the smell of coffee and my sister knocking on my bedroom door. She opened it, and I did my traditional scowl while rolling over to turn my back on her. "Oh, no you didn't. I'll kill you," she said jokingly. She handed me a coffee and wanted to discuss something with me. "Hey," she said, "you may want to lock your door at night when you sleep." "Why?" I had asked. "Because Sheena, she told me that she likes to open your door and watch you sleep at night." After hearing this, my first thought was she was just messing with me, as she always has since we were kids. I responded with something like, "Sure," but she had a pretty serious look on her face and told me that she was being honest, that I really should keep my door locked at night. Now I was officially weirded out. I cared about these kids, but it made me very uncomfortable that a second grader was able to open the door and watch me sleep without me knowing. And since I was a pretty light sleeper, this took me by surprise. I took my coffee and assured her I would lock my door, and after that, we decided to make plans for the day. At the end of the following day, everyone was starting to get ready for bed, and for some reason my head felt uneasy. I had told my sister that I didn't know why I felt so unnerved, but I thought I was gonna have a hard time falling asleep. Since she and Chris didn't have cable, Ripley brought me in a portable DVD player. I was excited to have something soothing to help me sleep. Was it perhaps something from the Hallmark Channel? Or maybe Andy Griffith? No. Apparently my sister feels nothing says cozy like the series I Shouldn't Be Alive. Well, no matter. I was tired and still preferred to watch something rather than nothing. We said our goodnights, and I pushed play. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to turn off that little nightlight on Sheena's nightstand, so I left that on while watching the show. Ripley and Chris's room was directly above the room I was sleeping in. I could hear their footsteps faintly thudding about, perhaps getting ready for bed. I figured they would be going to bed soon, since it was already around 10 o'clock. I had dozed off and then awakened almost exactly an hour later. I could still hear Ripley and Chris moving around upstairs, but it gave me comfort in knowing that they were still awake. I dozed back off and awakened almost exactly an hour later again. It was strange when I noticed the video had turned off. I restarted it to fall back asleep, and when I awakened for the last time, I noticed the nightstand clock glowed 1 a.m. I was covered in a cold sweat. It was then I heard the thudding above me still continuing, and at that moment, I came to the realization that the noises above me were not being made by Ripley and Chris. And just as soon as that hit me, I looked over to my right, at the row of white closets. In the corner, opposite the door, was a very large, dark shadow that nearly reached the ceiling. I was so frightened that my first instinct was to look away to the left in the direction of the nightstand. But as I turned back towards the closet, it was still there. Then almost instantaneously, it moved to the foot of my bed, making an extremely heavy, creaking sound against the old wooden floors. I threw back the covers, flew out of the bedroom, and made a beeline to the step-down living room across the way and around the corner. I was horrified. I didn't even want to go back into that room to retrieve some of my things. I covered myself with a blanket that belonged to one of the cats and decided to curl up on the couch for the night. The next morning, when my sister and Chris went into the kitchen to make coffee, they noticed where I was sleeping. When they asked what happened, I told them everything. The strange thing is that my sister didn't look surprised at all. Apparently, two of their friends had been sleeping in the basement bedrooms at one time. She went on to tell me that they had seen the same dark shadow in the same location, only down below, in the basement. For the rest of the trip, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that room. And eventually, the foster kids went back to their family, and for whatever reason, the house seemed to be restored to its original, comforting and inviting feel. But despite the lighter atmosphere, it was years before I could ever sleep in that room again.